Today we're talking about a board game that's all about finding your path without getting lost, working your way through a labyrinth of jungle, and being the first to reach the finish. Maybe that's why so many people call it amusing. Now I know what you're thinking. This is Board Game Dad. Isn't the beginning where you drop a dad joke? But what can I say? I couldn't think of anything. The game is Karuba, and while it's for 2 to 4 players, because players play simultaneously, theoretically you could buy multiple copies of the game and play with as many people as you want. That is, as long as you're willing to adopt one house rule, which I'll talk about in this review. And as always, I'll talk about how well the game went over with the kids, who in my case are 4 and 6 years old. And if you want, you can jump to that right now, but before I go into my final thoughts on the game, let's talk about how the gameplay works. In Karuba, all of the action takes place on individual player boards. The setup is easy. Take a player board, a set of adventurers and temples, and the tiles of your player color. Put all of the nuggets, crystals, and treasures in the center of the table within everyone's reach. Treasures have numbers on them. Stack them with the larger values on top. Of course, you'll want to inevitably organize your pieces. I like mine to be organized like this, numerically in a box. Designate one person to be the expedition leader. I'll talk about what an expedition leader does in a minute, but for now, just know that the expedition leader does not organize her pieces or even look at them. Her pieces should be face down and mixed up. By the way, let's talk about these pieces real quick. See how the numbers are in the top left corner? That must always be the case. In Karuba, pieces can never be rotated.
Wrong.
Got it? Good. Once everyone has arranged their materials, the game begins by declaring a starting position for each explorer and temple. Explorers start on the beach. Temples go in the jungle. To determine these positions, players will take turns calling out numbers. Blue explorer on 30 degrees, temple on 80 degrees. This should continue with each player choosing a pair of locations and everyone's board beginning in the exact same configuration. For the rest of the game, all players will be working with the same material, but playing it how they see fit. So, the expedition leader begins by drawing a random tile from her pile and calling out the number. Every player takes the same tile and plays it, and this just goes on for the rest of the game. The game continues until every tile has been played, or one player has reached every single temple. So, what can you do when you play a tile? There are actually only 2 things you can do with a tile. The first thing you can do is place it anywhere on your board. The only placement rule is that the number must stay in the top left corner. There are no rules about placing tiles sequentially, adjacent to each other. You can even create dead ends, but as you will find out, you probably don't want to do that. Lastly, concerning this action, you might have a tile with a crystal or a nugget on it. Awesome! Make sure to take that piece from the supply and put it with your tile. So the other thing you can do with the tile is discard the tile in order to move an adventurer. The number of spaces an adventurer can move is equal to the number of paths leading off the tile. This tile is worth 3 movement points. This tile is worth 4 movement points. You can only move adjacent tiles connected by a path. You can never share a tile with another adventurer or pass one that is in your way. Movement points cannot be split between multiple adventurers, and you don't have to use all of your movement points. Finally, during your movement, you may pick up a crystal or a nugget. However, you must end your movement on the tile with the treasure that you want to pick up. Eventually, your adventurers will reach a temple. When they do, take the topmost treasure. If a player has reached all 4 temples, the game ends immediately. Determine the winner by totaling the temple values and all the other treasures collected along the way. Crystal is worth 1 point at the end of the game, and nuggets are worth 2. At the beginning of this video, I mentioned a house rule that would enable you to combine boxes of Karuba to play with more than 4 players. The point values of the treasures are 5, 4, 3, and 2 points each. If you have a second box, you'll want to combine the treasures from the second box into the first box, but then how do you do the breakup? Is it 2 5s and then 1 4, 1 3, 1 2, or do you put an extra 3 in there? What you decide is up to you, but that is a modification that will need to be made in order to expand the game. Final thoughts on the game. So we have 2 reasons why we really like Karuba. One is that it's so easy to play. Once you learn the rules, you'll never forget them. It's really easy to teach people who are playing for the first time. Very minimal setup, and it takes like 15 to 25 minutes to play. People are hardly ever not in a mood to play Karuba. And the other reason we really like the game is because of the way it does simultaneous gameplay. It's just very fast moving. You don't waste any time waiting for your turn as other people are taking theirs. Now, as far as how it went over with the family, I have a 4 and a 6-year-old. My 6-year-old handled this game just fine. The box says 8 years old and up. For 6, not a problem. For my 4-year-old, this one, she was able to play with the family, but she needed a lot of help, and it was kind of taxing. We actually had her as the leader of the expedition, which can be kind of fun because they get to be the one who's in charge of everybody else. But in terms of like the strategy and trying to place pieces so that you can connect, that it didn't work at 4 years old. So if I could share something that I don't like about the game, the one thing that the game is lacking is a really dynamic build-up towards anything. Like, if you were to compare this to a game like Azul, where you're trying to get a certain set of tiles, and you're sitting there and you're going, oh, don't take those, don't take those, don't take those, or you're like, oh, yes, I got them. Like, that build-up, this game doesn't really have any build-up at all. And the closest thing that this game gets to that is where you're building a path and you're in a situation where you need a certain piece and you're just waiting for it to come up. And I mean, you can see the pieces that haven't come up yet. You can say, oh, there's 6 of them. It has to come up soon. And if it doesn't come up, you're just waiting. And that's not really, there's no build up there. So I guess that can kind of feel, it's just lacking. But like I said earlier, it's so easy to play. If you're not satisfied with one game, you're like, let's just play again. I mean, it's so easy. And in fact, the game has its own standards down here, and it gives itself the highest score for addictiveness, which I kind of say I agree with. It's simple enough that you can just play it again. So for perfect board game ratings, for theme, it's a 1. For mechanics, I'd say an 8. For strategy, it's like a 6. Luck, a 5. And complexity, a 3. So if you like this game, go ahead and check it out, or check it out on theperfectboardgame.com, and stick around, subscribe to the channel, because I come out with family-based board game reviews and other reviews for games that I really love every week. Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.